Most people think the Woolworth's lunch counter disappeared because America moved on to better food. That's not what happened. What actually closed was something far harder to replace than a menu, and most of us didn't notice until it was already gone. In 1960, you could walk into a Woolworth's, pull up a stool at the lunch counter, and get a hot meal, a cold drink, and change back from $1. Most people remember the store itself, the goldfish tanks, the Christmas ornaments, the candy bins. But the counter is the part that quietly fed an entire generation and then disappeared without much of a funeral. Here are 25 lost Woolworth's lunch counter foods nobody remembers. Let's count them down. Number 25, the grilled cheese sandwich. Comfort foods such as grilled cheese sandwiches were widely enjoyed at Woolworth's counters, and there's a reason it's on almost every list of foods people associate with the place. It's the dish that turned a shopping trip into a sit-down. You weren't planning to stop. You were going to grab a spool of thread and leave. But then the smell hit you from 20 feet away. Butter on a flat grill, bread going golden, and suddenly you were pulling out a stool. The grilled cheese at Woolworth's wasn't fancy. 2 slices of white bread, a slice of American cheese, pressed flat on the griddle until the outside crackled and the inside went molten. That was it, and it was perfect because it was exactly that simple. The woman behind the counter had made 1,000 of them. She didn't need to think about it. You could watch it happen in real time, and that was part of the appeal. Who could forget the special treat of a grilled cheese sandwich at the famous lunch counter? Not the people who grew up eating them, that's for sure. Number 24, the American cheese sandwich. The American cheese sandwich on the 1960 menu was priced at just 25 cents. That was likely the cheapest hot item on the entire menu, and the simplicity is the whole point. This wasn't a mistake or a filler item. It was the menu's way of saying, nobody who walks through this door goes hungry. You had a quarter, you had lunch. That was the deal. Woolworth's was known as a 5 and dime store, and quite literally, every product in the store, with the exception of the lunch counter foods, was limited to just 5 and 10 cent prices. The counter was where the pricing philosophy of the whole building lived in its purest form. A quarter sandwich was the edible version of a nickel toy, accessible to everyone, no exceptions. Number 23, the BLT. The BLT is still around today, so it doesn't get the nostalgia credit it deserves when people talk about Woolworth's. But former patrons bring it up over and over when they describe what they loved about the counter. And the reason is simple. It tasted different when someone made it fresh on a diner grill, who had been doing it the same way for 20 years at the same counter. Bacon laid flat on the griddle, crisped to order, real tomato slices, iceberg lettuce, mayo spread on toasted white bread. Nothing revolutionary. But there was a rhythm to the way a counter cook assembled a BLT that a fast food line can't replicate. The ingredients were the same everywhere. The hands that made it were not. Number 22. The 3-decker club sandwich. The 3-decker sandwich was listed at roughly 45 cents on the 1960 menu. That made it a step above the basic single-layer sandwiches, and at the counter, it had the feeling of a slightly more special occasion order. 3 slices of toast instead of 2. More ingredients stacked in between. If the grilled cheese was what you got when you stopped in on a Tuesday, the club was what you got when you had somewhere to be afterward and wanted to feel like you'd actually eaten. The triple-decker format was a diner-era flex. It said, we're not just slapping things together here. There's architecture involved, and at 45 cents, it still cost less than a modern vending machine snack. Number 21, the Frankfurter dinner. The Frankfurter dinner was priced at around 50 cents on the same 1960 menu. And notice the word dinner. This wasn't just a hot dog on a bun handed over a counter. It was framed as a full meal, meaning it came with a side. Hot dogs were a lunch counter staple across nearly every 5 and dime chain in the country, but calling it a dinner elevated it just enough to make you feel like you were getting something real for your 50 cents. Hot dogs were also fast. The counter moved quickly, and a Frankfurter was something the cook could have in front of you in under 2 minutes. Speed and price together made this one of the most practical orders on the menu, and practical was exactly what the lunch counter was built for. Number 20. The grilled ham and egg platter. The grilled ham and egg platter was a featured item on the Woolworth's luncheonette menu. And what makes this one interesting is what it tells you about the counter's identity. This wasn't a snack bar. It wasn't a candy counter with a hot plate in the back. The Woolworth's lunch counter served real hot plates throughout the day, bridging breakfast and lunch in a way that made it function more like a neighborhood diner than anything else. Ham on the flat grill, eggs cooked to order, everything hot and plated in front of you while you sat on your stool. The kind of meal your grandmother made on a Saturday morning, except you could get it at noon on a Wednesday while your mother finished shopping in the next aisle. Number 19. The hamburger platter. The hamburger platter on the 1960 menu was a quarter-pound all-beef burger on a toasted bun with relish or onion, priced at 55 cents, and the menu called it jumbo. That word mattered. A quarter-pound burger wasn't standard everywhere in 1960. Calling it jumbo was a genuine selling point, not just marketing noise. The Columbus Dispatch reported on the history of its local Woolworth's store, describing with admiration how the hamburgers had been grilled with the same care as they were 50 years prior, topped with lettuce and onion, and served up with an ice-cold Coke. 50 years of the same burger, made the same way, by people who knew what they were doing. That's not a restaurant, that's an institution. Number 18. The Steak-umm sandwich. This one is for the people who actually ate at the counter in the late 1970s, because the Steak-umm sandwich is not something most people associate with Woolworths at all. But it became something of a signature order at certain counters during that era. There are accounts of people who made it a regular stop specifically for this sandwich, couples who met there, people who built routines around it. Thin sliced beef on a flat grill, cooked fast, piled onto a roll. It was the counter's version of a cheesesteak, and it hit differently than the burger because it felt like something the counter had figured out on its own rather than something off a national template. That's the kind of item that turns a lunch stop into a personal memory. Number 17. The meatloaf plate. Here's where the menu starts to surprise people, because most folks remember Woolworths as a quick bite counter. Sandwiches, sodas, maybe a slice of pie. They forget that a lot of locations served full hot dinner plates, and the meatloaf plate was one of them. Patrons who remember it describe it the same way every time. It tasted like something made at home. Dense, savory, sliced thick, served with gravy and a side. The menu offerings included diner-style classics such as sandwiches, salads, rolls, roasted meats, an array of vegetables, and, of course, desserts. The meatloaf was the most home-cooked thing on that list, and in the middle of a shopping trip, that mattered more than people realize. Number 16. The fried fish plate. The menu at one location, which was there for 77 years, included hot meals such as roasted turkey with mashed potatoes, fried fish, and a baked Swiss steak smothered in gravy. The fried fish plate was part of that lineup, but it had a specific cultural context that most people don't think about: the Friday fish tradition. In heavily Catholic communities, eating fish on Fridays wasn't a preference, it was a practice. And Woolworth's counters in those towns kept fried fish as a standing Friday special because of it. The counter wasn't just responding to appetite, it was responding to the neighborhood. It knew who was sitting on those stools and what they needed on a Friday afternoon. Number 15. The baked Swiss steak. Smothered in gravy, this was one of the most substantial things on the hot plate menu, and it's one of the clearest examples of what people mean when they say the counter did real cooking. The menu at one longtime location included a baked Swiss steak smothered in gravy, and that location had been serving it consistently for over 50 years before it finally closed. Think about what that means. The same dish, made the same way for half a century. The recipe didn't change because the customers didn't want it to change. That kind of consistency is almost impossible to find now. It's not something a chain can manufacture. It just develops, slowly, over decades of showing up and doing the same thing right. Number 14. The roasted turkey with mashed potatoes. Woolworths had a love affair with turkey, serving it on plate lunches throughout the year. The explanation, according to Karen Plunkett Powell in Remembering Woolworths, was that the store bought up farm surpluses for good prices, whether vegetables, dairy products, or turkey. So the roasted turkey plate wasn't just a comfort food choice. It was a supply chain decision that happened to produce something genuinely good. Turkey with mashed potatoes, gravy poured over both, served hot at the counter like a Thanksgiving plate on a random Tuesday. It was the kind of thing you'd expect at a full-service restaurant, not at a retail store lunch counter. That's exactly why people still talk about it. And here's something to keep in mind as we get deeper into this list. We haven't even gotten to the item that most people who grew up near a Woolworths say they remember most vividly. That one's still coming. Number 13. The homemade vegetable sides. The store sourced ingredients from local dairy and produce farms, getting in on the farm-to-table movement early. Before that phrase became a restaurant marketing strategy, Woolworths was doing it by necessity and practicality. The store bought up farm surpluses for good prices, whether vegetables, dairy products, or turkey. So the vegetable sides that came with those hot plates weren't frozen, they weren't canned. They were made from whatever came in fresh that week from a local farm. Green beans, corn, stewed tomatoes, whatever was in season, whatever was available. That's why people remember the sides the same way they remember their grandmother's cooking. Because in a very real sense, it was the same supply chain. Number 12. The farm-to-counter story. This one isn't a dish. It's the detail behind all the dishes, and it changes how you think about everything on this list. Woolworths made it known that its lunch counters were fresh and modern. It led the way in food safety and sanitation, and its version of fast food stood out from any competition because of its affordability and good service. The store also sourced ingredients from local dairy and produce farms. Through the first half of the 20th century, the stores constantly reminded the public that they were outfitted with the latest in modern gas and electric appliances for cooking, refrigeration, cleaning, and sterilization. When a new Woolworth store opened in Abilene, Texas in 1939, a lengthy story reported that all utensils touched by food are of stainless, seamless steel. This was a counter that took what it was doing seriously, and the food tasted like it. Number 11. The fried fish and chips, a regional favorite. At certain locations, particularly in Canada and the northern United States, fish and chips was a beloved menu staple. Each one of these areas had a Woolworths with a lunch counter, and one patron recalled cherishing every bite of the fish and chips. This wasn't a universal menu item across every location. It was a regional specialty, the kind of thing a particular counter developed because that's what the neighborhood wanted. That's actually one of the things that made Woolworths counters feel different from chain restaurants. A chain gives every location the same menu. A Woolworths counter in Montreal served something that a Woolworths counter in Georgia might not. The counter belonged to the neighborhood it was in, and the menu reflected that. Number 10. The cozy winter soups. The menu at one longtime location included homemade vegetable soup that only cost 30 cents. And that soup wasn't on the menu year-round. It rotated in during the colder months as part of a seasonal approach to the menu that most people don't associate with a retail store lunch counter at all. Think about that for a second. This was a counter inside a department store, and it was changing its menu with the seasons. Soup in winter, lighter fare in summer. That's not a snack bar. That's a neighborhood diner that just happened to be located between the housewares aisle and the fabric bolts. Number 9. The seasonal summer salads. The warm weather flip side of the winter soups. Lighter plates rotated onto the menu during summer months. Fresher, cooler options for shoppers who didn't